In this video, you're going to walk along the Berlin Wall Trail to parts less trodden, from the Hauptbahnhof north to Bernauer Straße. You will visit checkpoints, ghost stations, and graveyards to see how the wall has shaped the Berlin of today. I will also tell you of dramatic escape attempts as well as the tragic ends for some seeking refuge in the West. This is part 3 of my Berlin Wall Trails series. I've already walked from the Hauptbahnhof to Checkpoint Charlie and beyond. I'll link to those videos in the description below. I will also link to a map with the stops mentioned in this video so that you can recreate this walk when you find yourself in Berlin. Or you can hire me, Steve, from Experienced Berlin Tours to show you around. My contact details are also in the description. So, without further ado, let's hit the trail.
During the Cold War, the split in Berlin went right through here, at Humboldthain. Berlin's Hauptbahnhof, on your left, sits on what was then in the British sector. Humboldthain and the bank on the right belonged to the Soviet sector. Cross the bridge and take the stairs down to the waterfront. The white building here, today, did not exist during the split. Instead, there was mostly an empty field. But keep walking north until you reach a stone marker and an information board. This is the story of the first person killed by East German border guards. Günter Litfin, a 24-year-old tailor who lived in East Berlin but worked in the West, was one of some 80,000 Berliners called border crossers. He had just secured a new apartment in the West and was preparing to move in when the barrier was abruptly installed, preventing him from doing so. On August 24, 1961, just 11 days after the wall was put up, Litfin attempted to swim across Humboldthain to the British sector on this spot. Since the border's creation, several people had been able to find opportunities to cross, weaknesses in the wall. It was still inconceivable to many that the border guards would shoot to kill. Litfin was spotted by transit police who were on this S-Bahn train bridge leading to the then Nordbahnhof. Litfin jumped into the water and attempted to cross to the other side. The border guards first fired warning shots, but then, just as he was about to reach freedom, he was gunned down. His death caused outrage in the West. In the East, Litfin was condemned as a criminal and his family was harassed and silenced. And you only have to walk for 1 minute before reaching another. Just 9 months after Günter Litfin's death, another East Berliner paid with his life. On May 27th of 1962, Lutz Haberlandt, a bricklayer from Prenzlauer Berg, crossed the Charité hospital grounds here at what's today Charité's Medical History Museum. He climbed over a wall and slipped into the border strip, aiming for the water and the safety of the Western Bank. East German transport police and border guards spotted him from this same train bridge. Nearby, border guards fired warning shots, then several aimed rounds. One bullet went straight through his head, likely killing him instantly. Okay, moving on. I am now walking along the former path of the outer wall, which normally butted up to West Berlin. However, since East Berlin controlled both the waters of Humboldthain as well as the Berlin-Spandau shipping channel into which it flowed, constructing the wall exactly on the border was impossible. Now we continue up to our next stop, Invalidenstrasse and the Sandkrugbrücke. Today, Invalidenstrasse is a very busy road that leads west to Hauptbahnhof, and it's here where you'll find the old Kaiser Wilhelm Academy, a military medical training facility. From 1949 to 1990, it housed the head office of the Supreme Court of the GDR, tasked with investigating and trying espionage cases. And from 1945 until 1990, this intersection was the Invalidenstrasse checkpoint, linking West Berlin Moabit's district in the British sector with the East Berlin's Mitte. It was mainly reserved for West Berlin citizens with permits plus a small group of accredited diplomats. Notably, it was also used by the Soviet War Memorial Guard Detachment. I made a video of that memorial located in Tiergarten, where this detachment took part in changing of the guard ceremonies. On the eastern side, the checkpoint was manned by GDR border troops and Stasi passport control. On the western side, it was manned by the West Berlin Police Department as well as customs officers. British military police were ultimately in control but did not administer the checkpoint. And right here, one of the wildest escape attempts of the Berlin Wall took place. On a Sunday in May of 1963, a group of young East Berliners stole a public transit bus and drove it straight toward this checkpoint. They bolted metal plates to the front and sides as armor and aimed for the opening in a concrete wall. Border troops opened fire from both sides of the road, more than 100 shots in total. The bus finally died at the last barrier, just a meter short of West Berlin. Everyone on board was wounded and arrested.
Now, before we head further north, a quick detour. Since the topic of this video is a wall, I should mention that so far, the Berlin Wall Trail followed the route of a previous wall in Berlin's history, the Customs Wall.
This wall was roughly 16 kilometers long, built around the expanded city in order to collect excise taxes for the king. There were 20 tors, or gates, with the Brandenburg Gate being the grandest of the land gates and the only one that still exists today. The customs wall route turned toward the southeast, here at Invalidenstrasse. Very little of this wall remains, but just a few minutes walk from here, roughly 40 meters of it still exists. It's incorporated into the walls of a new construction on Platz vor der neuen Tor, or square in front of the new gate. There's also an information board with photos of the wall, another gate, and an illustration of what Newgate once looked like. Okay, back to the Berlin Wall Trail. And we continue along the eastern bank of the Spandau Shipping Canal. As was the case to the south, both the water and eastern side belong to the GDR. And here is an image of where we are walking right now looked like in 1980. To my right is the former land of the Invalidenhaus, an old soldiers' home for veterans of the Prussian military. And we are headed for the Invalidenfriedhof, the cemetery that was connected to the home. It was founded in 1748 as a cemetery for wounded Prussian soldiers and later became the resting place of many prominent military figures. Over the centuries, it expanded with graves from the Napoleonic Wars and both World Wars. And there are a couple of infamous people buried here as well. I published a video on the cemetery that I will link to in the video description. You should check that one out. When the Berlin Wall went up in 1961, the cemetery suddenly found itself on the front line of the Cold War. To accommodate the path of the Berlin Wall border system, the GDR leveled about a third of the cemetery. Entire rows of graves were bulldozed. And in this image, you can see what part of Section F, one of the affected sections, once looked like. Mausoleums, monuments, and even centuries-old family plots were all removed to make way for the wall. Some graves were relocated, but most weren't. The remains beneath were likely left in place. A section of the original inner wall, the wall that faced East Berlin, still exists in situ, and two tragic incidents took place in this area. In May of 1962, just behind me, along the canal, 14-year-old Wilfried Tews attempted to escape East Berlin by swimming across the canal into West Berlin. The East German border guards on duty here opened fire on the teenager as he swam, striking him half a dozen times. West Berlin police returned fire. In the exchange, one of the border guards, Peter Göring, was fatally wounded. The East German regime declared him a hero, but to much of the world it was a tragic reminder of the human cost of the wall. And about 500 meters to the north, another tragedy involving a teenager unfolded. Just days after the East German uprising of June of 1953, tensions along the border were extremely high. On June 22nd, 15-year-old Wolfgang Röhling from West Berlin came to the Spandau Schiffskanal to swim with friends. Although the entire canal belonged to East Berlin at this location, the boys believed the border ran across the embankment and thought they had the right to be here. After being told to leave by East German border guards, they returned and exchanged insults. One soldier took aim from behind the wall and fired a single shot that hit Wolfgang in the head, killing him instantly. The incident caused immediate outrage in West Berlin and became an early symbol of the deadly risks along the sector border. Moving on, we continue north along the canal another 200 meters till we reach our next stop. And here we find one of the last preserved border towers remaining in Berlin. It's a memorial to Günter Litfin, who I mentioned at the start of this video. His brother Jürgen was responsible for saving this tower. It's open from May through October, when you can climb to the top and experience a view that border guards once had. It provides insight into the strict surveillance measures along the Berlin Wall. It's certainly one of the more overlooked Cold War relics in Berlin. Moving on once again, the path of the wall originally continued north for one more block, but today's trail takes a detour around a parking lot and a heliport for the Bundeswehr Krankenhaus. Today this is a hospital for the German Armed Forces that also treats federal employees. During the division of the city, this was a hospital that treated members of the People's Police, including border guards as well as wounded escapees. For the victims of border guard brutality, this wasn't usually the closest hospital. Rather, it was the most secure in order to keep the escape attempt out of the public's eye. And just past the hospital's main entrance, we return to the former path of the Berlin Wall, where it made a turn to the east along Boyenstrasse. Boyenstrasse is illustrative of what has happened along much of the former route of the Berlin Wall Trail. This is an image from the West Berlin side in 1960, looking back along Boyenstrasse in the opposite direction that we are walking. What is here today on the southern side, what was the East Berlin side, are new residential buildings, well, at least built since reunification. On the western side, you have tennis courts, football pitches, and other athletic facilities, relics of a time when this land was less desirable to build upon. At the end of the street, the Berlin Wall turned back to the south, where it led to another checkpoint. This was the location of the Chaussee Strasse border crossing. This was one of the smaller checkpoints along the Berlin Wall. It connected East Berlin's Mitte district with West Berlin's Wedding district, which was in the French sector. It was primarily used by West Berliners who had permits to enter East Berlin. No Allied military personnel were permitted. The border crossing was also the site of an early escape attempt. In November of 1961, just a few months after the Berlin Wall was erected, 5 East Berlin citizens in an armored Opel delivery vehicle made it through a hail of gunfire to reach the freedom of the West. The actual vehicle is on display at the museum on Checkpoint Charlie. And just across the street from the former border crossing is a shell limestone sculpture, a memorial to German reunification. It was placed here in 1962, before reunification, very early in the wall's existence. The location was selected so that when looking back toward the southwest, it would appear as though East and West Berliners were embracing over the checkpoint. Okay, moving on, and we're headed east along the trail along Liesenstrasse. Here at Liesenstrasse, you're walking through what used to be a continuous field of cemeteries on both sides of the road. In the 1830s and 40s, 4 church graveyards were laid out here. 3 of them, including this, the Evangelical Domfriedhof, ended up on the East Berlin side when the wall went up in 1961. As was the case at Invalidenfriedhof, to create the border strip, the GDR cleared a 40-meter wide belt straight through the graveyard along this edge. Families could move some burials, but many graves were simply erased. The golden cross at the entrance is the old dome cross of the Berlin Cathedral, now standing over a damaged cemetery. Its plaque states that it's here as a reminder of the dead, whose graves were disturbed by the wall, as well as those who lost their lives to the wall. The tombs, vaults, and grave plots that were part of the cemeteries but out of reach of the wall still exist today. There is also a memorial stone that was placed in remembrance of the unknown civilian war victims who were buried in mass graves, who I presume are still buried here. And at the very end, as we reach the railway line, there is an outdoor exhibit placed on the foundation of a former guard tower. It lists the names of the people whose graves could not be identified as having been moved. It also gives some information about the wall, in particular how it disrupted these cemeteries. And from here, you can see parts of the inner wall in situ running south along the S-Bahn lines. Okay, moving on. Let me bring us underneath the train bridges here and turn south. There's a metal staircase that brings us up to an embankment. We're stepping onto what was once a major railway corridor. Before the Berlin Wall, this elevated line carried freight and regional trains running in and out of the huge Humboldthain and Stettener Bahnhof yards. When the wall went up in 1961, East Germany converted this entire rail corridor into a fortified border zone. The tracks closest to West Berlin were abandoned, the embankment was widened, and the outer border wall was built right along the edge of the rails. After reunification, the area was completely transformed. And in this image, we are looking back northward. You can see the watchtower on the left, where the outdoor cemetery exhibit that we just visited stands today. The wall and all security structures were removed, the embankment was lowered in places, and the former patrol route was converted into what is now Park on Humboldthain's southern extension. Today we have community spaces, the climbing center made from recycled concrete, sports courts, playgrounds, bike paths, mini golf, and long green corridors where the patrol road once ran. And the park ends at Nordbahnhof on Bernauer Straße. During the Cold War, Nordbahnhof was one of 16 sealed stations on 2 U-Bahn lines and 1 S-Bahn line, all starting in West Berlin, dipped under East Berlin, and then returned to the west. Once the wall went up, East German authorities bricked up entrances, sealed stairways, blocked passageways, and installed fences, alarms, and patrol posts inside the stations. Platforms were dimly lit, stripped of signs, and guarded by transit police and border troops. No one can get on or off, not East Berliners or West Berliners. From the train, West Berlin passengers could only glimpse these empty platforms as shadows, which is how the nickname Ghost Stations was born. The exhibit here, called Border and Ghost Stations, explains how the tunnels were secured to prevent escapes by citizens, rail workers, and even the guards themselves. And it's free to visit and open whenever the station is, which is most of the time. And Nordbahnhof is adjacent to the Berlin Wall Memorial, the premier location to learn about the Berlin Wall and its impacts on the city and its inhabitants. Bernauer Straße became one of the most dramatic front lines of the Cold War because of a strange geographical quirk. The entire street belonged to West Berlin, but the buildings along its south side belonged to the east. When the border was sealed in August of 1961, residents could literally climb out of their windows into freedom, until East German forces bricked up the buildings, evacuated the tenants, and eventually demolished entire blocks to clear space for the wall's expanding barrier system. The Berlin Wall Memorial is just over a kilometer long and is divided into 4 sections. In the first section, Section A, focuses on the death strip. Here you'll see the monument, the original part of the memorial, which preserves, to a certain extent, this stretch of the border as it looked in the late 1980s. It includes a guard tower, an inner as well as outer wall, a guard road, and a signals fence. It's also where we find yet another cemetery diminished by the wall, the Sophienkirche, or the Sophia Church Cemetery, including the excavated base of the cemetery's outer wall. It's also where you find Bergstrasse, the only street in Berlin still split by the wall. And the Wall of Victims is also here, which includes images of people who died as a result of the wall. Second section, Section B, tells the story of the neighborhood itself. This is where the famous Reconciliation Church once stood, trapped in a no man's land and blown up by the East German authorities in 1985. The modern Chapel of Reconciliation now stands on its footprint. This section also highlights Bernauer Strasse's escape stories, the early window jumps, the deadly fall of Ida Siegmann, and the network of escape tunnels dug from west to east. 10 tunnels were attempted here, but only 3 succeeded. The most famous, Tunnel 57, got its name because it helped 57 people reach the west before it was betrayed. The Stasi even dug their own counter-tunnel to intercept escape attempts. The third section, Section C, explains how the wall was engineered and constantly upgraded. One of its key moments is the iconic escape of border guard Konrad Schumann, who leapt over barbed wire just days after the construction began. A reminder that even those ordered to guard the border sometimes fled from it. And the final section, Section D, spreads farther out and focuses on daily life near the wall. And the Berlin Wall Trail continues north into Mauer Park, a park that has a popular Sunday flea market. But that and beyond will have to wait for the next video.
So, if you haven't done so, be sure to check out my previous 2 videos on the Berlin Wall Trail. The first one is here. Or check out my video on sites to visit from the Cold War era here. And please let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers for now.